Tajikistan harkens to the Samanid Empire. The Tajik people came under Russian rule in the 1860s. The Basmachi revolt broke out in the wake of the Russian Revolution of 1917 and was quelled in the early 1920s during the Russian Civil War. In 1924, Tajikistan became an autonomous Soviet Socialist Republics of the Soviet Union, the Tajik ASSR, within Uzbekistan. In 1929, Tajikistan was made one of the component republics of the Soviet Union, Tajik Soviet Socialist Republic, and it kept that status until gaining independence 1991 after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. It has since experienced 3 changes in government and the Tajik Civil War. A peace agreement among rival factions was signed in 1997. Antiquity. Tajikistan was part of the Bactria-Marjana archaeological complex in the Bronze Age, candidate for Proto-Indo-Iranian or Proto-Iranian culture. Tajikistan was part of Scythia in classical antiquity. Most of modern Tajikistan had formed parts of ancient Cambodia and Parama-Cambodia kingdoms, which find references in the ancient Indian epics like the Mahabharata. Linguistic evidence, combined with ancient literary and inscriptional evidence, has led many eminent Indologists to conclude that ancient Cambodias originally belonged to Central Asia. Akaria Yaskasnirugta attests that verb avati in the sense to go was used by only the Cambodians. It has been shown that the modern Galcha dialects, mainly spoken in Pamirs and countries on the headwaters of the Oxus, still use terms derived from ancient Cambodia avati in the sense to go. The Yanyobi dialect spoken in Yanyobi province around the headwaters of Zeravshan Valley in Sogdiana also still contains a relic u from ancient Cambodia avati in the sense to go. Further, Saji Grierson says that the speech of Badakhshan was a Galcha until about 3 centuries ago, when it was supplanted by a form of Persian. Thus, the ancient Cambodia probably included the Badakhshan, Pamirs and northern territories including Yanyobi province in the Doaba of the Oxus and Jaxartes. On the east it was bounded roughly by Yarkand and or Kashgar, on the west by Balaka, on the northwest by Sogdiana, on the north by Utarakuru, on the southeast by Darada, and on the south by Gandhara. Numerous Indologists locate original Cambodia in Pamirs and Badakhshan and the Parama Cambodia further north, in the Trans-Pamirian territories comprising Zeravshan Valley, north up parts of Sogdiana, Fargana, in the Sakadviparasithya of the classical writers. Thus, in the pre-Buddhist times, the parts of modern Tajikistan including territories as far as Zeravshan Valley in Sogdiana formed parts of ancient Cambodia and the Parama Cambodia kingdoms when it was ruled by Iranian Cambodians until it became part of Achaemenid Empire. Sogdiana, Bactria, Merv and Khwarezm were the 4 principal divisions of ancient Central Asia inhabited by the ancestors of the present-day Tajikistani Tajiks. Tajiks are now found only in historic Bactria and Sogdiana. Merv is inhabited by the Turkoman and Khwarezm by Uzbeks and Kazakhs. Sogdiana was made up of the Zeravshan and Kashkadarya river valleys. Currently one of the surviving peoples of Sogdiana who speak a dialect of the Sogdian language of the Yagnibus and Shunanis. Bactria was located in northern Afghanistan between the mountain range of the Hindu Kush and the Amu Darya River and some areas of current South Tajikistan. During different periods, Bactria was a center of various kingdoms or empires, and is probably where Zoroastrianism originated. The Avesta, the holy book of Zoroastrianism, was written in the Old Bactrian dialect. It is also thought that Zoroaster was most likely born in Bactria. Achaemenid period. During the Achaemenid period, Sogdiana and Bactria were part of the Persian Empire. Sogdians and Bactrians occupied important positions in the administration and military of the Achaemenid Empire. Hellenistic period. After the Persian Empire was defeated by Alexander the Great, Bactria, Sogdiana and Merv, being part of Persian Empire, had to defend themselves from new invaders. In fact, the Macedonians faced very stiff resistance under the leadership of Sogdian ruler Spitamenes. Alexander the Great managed to marry Roxana, the daughter of a local ruler, and inherited his land. Following Alexander's brief occupation, the Hellenistic successor states of the Seleucids and Greco-Bactrians controlled the area for another 200 years in what is known as the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom. During the time period from 90 BC to 30 BC, Uasia destroyed the last Hellenistic successor states and, together with the Tokhari, created a Kushan Empire around 30 AD. Kushan Empire for another 400 years, until 410 AD. The Kushan Empire was a major power in the region along with the Roman Empire, the Parthian Empire and the Han Empire. Notable contact was made with local peoples when the envoys of the Han dynasty journeyed to this area in the 2nd century BC. At the end of the Kushan period, the empire became much smaller and would have to defend itself from the powerful Sasanid Empire that replaced the Parthian Empire. The famous Kushan king Kanishka promoted Buddhism, and during this time Buddhism was exported from Central Asia to China. The Sassanids, Hephtalites, and Gokturks. The Sassanids once controlled much of what is now Tajikistan, but lost the territory to the Hephtalites during the time of Peroz I. They created a powerful empire that succeeded in making Iran a tributary state around 483 to 485. Shah of Persia Peroz fought 3 wars with Hephtalites. During the first war he was captured by Hephthalite army and later was released after Byzantine emperor paid a ransom for him. During the second war Peroz was captured again and was released after paying a huge contribution to the Hephthalite king. During the third war Peroz was killed. The Hephtalites were subjugated in 565 by a combination of Sassanid and Gokturk forces. Subsequently, present Tajikistan was ruled by Gokturks and Sassanids. However, when the Sassanid Empire fell, the Turks kept control of Tajikistan, but they later lost it to the Chinese people. However, they later managed to take control of Tajikistan once again, only to lose it to the Arabs in 710. Medieval history. Arab Caliphate. The Transoxiana Principalities never formed a viable confederacy. Beginning in 651, the Arabs organized periodic marauding raids deep into the territory of Transoxania, but it was not until the appointment of Ibn Qutayba as governor of Khorasan in 705, during the reign of Walid I, that the Caliphate adopted the policy of annexing the lands beyond the Oxus. In 715, the task of annexation was accomplished. The entire region thus came under the control of the Caliphate of Islam, but the Arabs continued to rule through local Sogdian kings and Harkens. The ascension of the Abbasids to rule the Caliphate opened a new era in the history of Central Asia, while the predecessors, the Umayyads, were little more than leaders of a loose confederation of Arab tribes. The Abbasids set out to build a huge multi-ethnic centralized state that would emulate and perfect the Sasanian government machine. They gave the Near East and Transoxiana a unity, which they had been lacking since the time of Alexander the Great. Samanid Empire. The Samanid dynasty ruled in Khorasan and was founded by Saman Qudar. The Samanids were one of the first purely indigenous dynasties to rule in Persia after the Muslim-Arab conquest. During the reign of Saman Qudar's great-grandson Ismail I, Samanids expanded in Khorasan. In 900, Ismail defeated the Saffarids in Khorasan, while his brother was the governor of Transoxiana. Thus, Samanid rule was acclaimed over the combined regions. The cities of Bukhara and Samarkand became centers of art, science, and literature. Industries included pottery making and bronze casting. After 950, Samanid power weakened, but was briefly revitalized under Nuh-II, who ruled from 976 to 997. However, with the oncoming encroachment of Muslim Turks, the Samanids lost the domains south of the Oxus River, which were taken by Ghaznavids. In 999, Bukhara was taken by the Karakhanids. The Samanid Ishmi Muntazir tried to restore the dynasty, until he was assassinated by an Arab Bedouin chieftain. The attack of the Karakhanid Turks ended the Samanid dynasty in 999, and dominance in Transoxiana passed on to Turkic rulers, Karakhanids and Khwarezm Shahs. After the collapse of Samanid dynasty, Central Asia became the battleground of many Asian invaders who came from the northeast. Mongol rule. The Mongol Empire swept through Central Asia, invaded Khwarezmian Empire and sacked the cities of Bukhara and Samarkand, looting and massacring people everywhere. Timurid Empire. Timur, founder of the Timurid Empire, was born on 8 April 1336 in Kesh near Samarkand. He was a member of the Turkesized Balas tribe, a Mongol subgroup that he had settled in Transoxiana after taking part in Genghis Khan's son Chagatai's campaigns in that region. Timur began his life as a bandit leader. During this period, he received an arrow wound in the leg, as a result of which he was nicknamed Timur Ilanga Timur the Lame. Although the last Timurid ruler of Herat, Badi, Arizona, Zaman finally fell to the armies of the Uzbek Muhammad Shaybani Khan in 1506, the Timurid ruler of Fergana Zahir-ud-Din Babur survived the collapse of the dynasty and re-established the Timurid dynasty in India in 1526, where they became known as the Mughals. Early modern history. Turkic rule. The Shaybanid state was divided into appanages between all male members of the dynasty, who would designate the supreme ruler, the oldest member of clan. The seat of Khan was first Samarkand, the capital of the Timurids, but some of the Khans preferred to remain in the former appanages. Thus Bukhara became the seat of the Khan for the first time under Ubayd Allah Khan. The period of political expansion and economical prosperity was short-lived. Soon after the death of Abd Allah Khan, the Shaybanid dynasty died out and was replaced by the Janid or Astrakhanid dynasty, another branch of the descendants of Jochi, whose founder Yani Khan was related to Abd Allah Khan through his marriage to Abdullah Khan's sister. The Astrakhanids are also said to be connected to the Hashemites due to Imam Qulai Khan's status as a Sayyid. The descendants today live in India. In 1709, eastern part of Khanate of Bukhara seceded and formed Khanate of Kokand. Thus, eastern part of present Tajikistan passed to Khanate of Kokand, while western one remained part of Khanate of Bukhara. Persian and Bukharan rule in 1740. The Janid Khanate was conquered by Nader Shah, the Afsharid ruler of Persia. The Janid Khan Abu al-Faiz retained his throne, becoming Nadir's vassal. After the death of Nader Shah in 1747, the chief of the Manghit tribe, Muhammad Rahim Biazali, overcame his rivals from other tribes and consolidated his rule in the Khanate of Bukhara. His successor, however, ruled in the name of puppet Khans of Janid origin. In 1785, Shah Murad formalized the family's dynastic rule, and the Khanate became the Emirate of Bukhara. Modern history. Russian vassalage. Russian imperialism led to the Russian Empire's conquest of Central Asia during the late 19th century's imperial era. Between 1864 and 1885, Russia gradually took control of the entire territory of Russian Turkestan, the Tajikistan portion of which had been controlled by the Emirate of Bukhara and Khanate of Kokand. Tashkent was conquered in 1865, and in 1867 the Turkestan Governor-Generalship was created with Konstantin Petrovich von Kaufmann as the first Governor-General. The expansion was motivated by Russia's economic interests and was connected with the American Civil War in the early 1860s, which severely interrupted the supply of cotton fiber to the Russian industry and forced Russia to turn to Central Asia as an alternative source of cotton supply as well as a market for Russian-made goods. The Russian regime in the 1870s attempted to switch cultivation in the region from grain to cotton. By 1885, Tajikistan's territory was either ruled by the Russian Empire or its vassal state, the Emirate of Bukhara. Nevertheless, Tajiks felt little Russian influence. Russian Empire, being a much bigger state with a huge population and having an advanced military, had little difficulty in conquering the regions inhabited by Tajiks, meeting fierce resistance only at Jizik, Uratayub, and when the garrison in Samarkand was besieged in 1868 by forces from Shah Isabs and the inhabitants of the city. The army of the Emirate of Bukhara was utterly defeated in 3 battles, and on the 18th of June 1868 Emir Mozaffar al-Din signed a peace treaty with the Governor-General of Russian Turkestan von Kaufmann. Samarkand and the Upper-Zeravshan were annexed by Russia and the country was open to Russian merchants. The emir retained his throne as a vassal of Russia and with Russian help he established control over Shah Isabs, the mountainous regions in the Upper-Zeravshan Valley and the principalities of the western Pamir. During the late 19th century, the Jadidists established themselves as an Islamic social movement throughout the region. Although the Jadidists were pro-modernization and not necessarily anti-Russian, the Russians viewed the movement as a threat. Russian troops were required to restore order during uprisings against the Khanate of Kokand between 1910 and 1913. Further violence occurred in July 1916 when demonstrators attacked Russian soldiers in Kujand over the threat of forced conscription during World War I. Despite Russian troops quickly bringing Kujand back under control, clashes continued throughout the year in various locations in Tajikistan. At the end of August 1920, the last emir, Saeed Alam Khan, was overthrown by Soviet troops. On the 6th of October 1920, the emirate was abolished and the Bukharan People's Soviet Republic was proclaimed. Basmachi movement. The Basmachi movement, a Basmachi revolt, was an uprising against Russian imperial and Soviet rule that arose after the Russian Revolution of 1917. Guerrillas throughout Central Asia. The movement's roots lay in the anti-conscription violence of 1916 that erupted when the Russian Empire began to draft Muslims for army service. During World War I, in the months following the October 1917 revolution, the Bolsheviks seized power in many parts of the Russian Empire and the Russian Civil War began. Turkestani Muslim political movements attempted to form an autonomous government in the city of Kokand, in the Fergana Valley. The Bolsheviks launched an assault on Kokand in February 1918 and carried out a general massacre of up to 25,000 people. The massacre rallied support to the Basmachi movements, who waged a guerrilla war and a conventional war that seized control of large parts of the Fergana Valley and much of Turkestan. The fortunes of the decentralized movement fluctuated throughout the early 1920s, but by 1923 the Red Army's extensive campaigns dealt the Basmachis many defeats. After major Red Army campaigns and concessions regarding economic and Islamic practices in the mid-1920s, the military fortunes and popular support of the Basmachi declined. Resistance to Soviet-Russian rule did flare up again to a lesser extent in response to collectivization campaigns in the pre-World War II era. A consequence of the conflict and Soviet agriculture policies was that Central Asia suffered a famine that claimed many lives. Soviet rule in 1924. The Tajik Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic was created as a part of Uzbekistan, but when national borders were drawn in 1928, the ancient Tajik cities of Bukhara and Samarkand were placed outside of the Tajikistan ASSR. As citizens of the newly established Uzbek ASSR, many Tajiks came under pressure to conform to the newly ascribed Uzbek identity, and under threat of exile, many were forced to change their identity and sign in passports as Uzbeks. Tajik schools were closed and Tajiks were not appointed to leadership positions simply because of their ethnicity. Between 1927 and 1934, collectivization of agriculture and a rapid expansion of cotton production took place, especially in the southern region. Soviet collectivization policy brought violence against peasants and forced resettlement occurred throughout Tajikistan. Consequently, some peasants fought collectivization and revived the Basmachi movement. Some small-scale industrial development also occurred during this time, along with the expansion of irrigation infrastructure. 2 rounds of Soviet purges directed by Moscow resulted in the expulsion of nearly 10,000 people from all levels of the Communist Party of Tajikistan. Ethnic Russians were sent in to replace those expelled, and subsequently Russians dominated party positions at all levels, including the top position of First Secretary. Between 1926 and 1959, the proportion of Russians among Tajikistan's population grew from less than 1% to 13%. Baba John Gafurov, Tajikistan's first secretary of the Communist Party of Tajikistan from 1946 to 1956, was the only Tajikistani politician of significance outside of the country during the Soviet era. He was followed in office by Tursun Aljabayev, Jabor Rasulov, and Ramon Nabayev. Tajiks began to be conscripted into the Soviet army in 1939, and during World War II around 260,000 Tajik citizens fought against Germany, Finland and Japan. Between 60,000 and 120,000 of Tajikistan's 1,530,000 citizens were killed during World War II. Following the war and Stalin's reign, attempts were made to further expand the agriculture and industry of Tajikistan. During 1957–58, Nikita Khrushchev's Virgin Lands campaign focused attention on Tajikistan, where living conditions, education and industry lagged behind the other Soviet republics. In the 1980s, Tajikistan had the lowest household saving rate in the USSR, the lowest percentage of households in the 2 top per capita income groups, and the lowest rate of university graduates per 1,000 people. By the late 1980s, Tajik nationalists were calling for increased rights. Real disturbances did not occur within the republic until 1990. The following year, the Soviet Union collapsed, and Tajikistan declared its independence. Republic of Tajikistan. The Tajikistan Soviet Socialist Republic was among the last republics of the Soviet Union to declare its independence. On September 9, following the collapse of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, Tajikistan declared its independence. During this time, use of the Tajik language, an official language of the Tajikistan ASSR next to Russian, was increasingly promoted. Ethnic Russians, who had held many governing posts, lost much of their influence and more Tajiks became politically active. The nation almost immediately fell into a civil war that involved various factions fighting one another. These factions were often distinguished by clan loyalties. The non-Muslim population, particularly Russians and Jews, fled the country during this time because of persecution, increased poverty and better economic opportunities in the West or in other former Soviet republics. Emomali Rahmon came to power in 1994 and continues to rule to this day. Ethnic cleansing was controversial during the civil war in Tajikistan. By the end of the war, Tajikistan was in a state of complete devastation. The estimated dead numbered over 100,000. Around 1.2 million people were refugees inside and outside of the country. In 1997, a ceasefire was reached between Rahmon and opposition parties. Peaceful elections were held in 1999, but they were reported by the opposition as unfair, and Rahmon was re-elected by almost unanimous vote. Russian troops were stationed in southern Tajikistan in order to guard the border with Afghanistan until summer 2005. Since the September 11, 2001 attacks, American, Indian and French troops have also been stationed in the country.